Got a couple more people joining. So my name is Kayla Bodie. I'm the program manager here with the Division of Child Care, and I oversee the background check unit. We process background checks for all of the child care providers and child welfare providers with the division. So we are going to go ahead and get started. And I did post in the chat box, but if you would like a copy of this presentation, you can put your email in the chat box. And once we are done, we will be sure to send that to you. It'll have all the links and information in it so that you can go back and get those consent forms and the other things that we're going to provide you with. So we also have Miss Brenda Burr on the call. She is the program coordinator here with our unit. Brenda, do you want to say hi to everyone?
Good morning, everyone. This is Brenda Burr. I was trying to find the button to unmute myself. I'm the DHS program coordinator, and I work with Kayla Bodie.
Yeah, we've got some other staff on our call. So we have Yolanda Robinson, Alicia Christopher, and we have Mikhail Sellers, Andre Williams, and let's see, I believe that's all that we have today, and Miss Brenda. So we've got our staff on here as well. Brenda's going to be in the chat box. She's going to be answering any questions that you may have, or if you need us to stop and go back to anything, please feel free to just type it in the chat box, and Brenda will be there for those. So let's go ahead and just get started with our slides today. So background checks. The reason why we do background checks is to keep a safe and work environment for children and staff. This is a requirement for the state of Arkansas. And so we're going to go through and talk about who needs a background check. We're going to talk about how you are going to enter those background checks. We are going to talk about what are some potential issues that can cause a holdup of those background checks. And so we're just going to go through the whole process, and we're going to open it up for questions at the end. So who needs a background check? All staff need a background check. That means janitors, therapists, volunteers, and student observers. Those people are in a gray area that you can see on the screen. Volunteers and student observers, we kind of consider this a gray area because those two groups have different requirements based on their role in your facility. They must have a child maltreatment. However, depending on their involvement, they may need a criminal and FBI check as well. And you can always refer to your minimum licensing requirements, section 304 and section 305. That's where you'll see the section regarding volunteers and student observers. And we always recommend, please reach out to your licensing specialist if you need clarification on who would be considered a volunteer or a student observer. And you'll see here that any staff will need a maltreatment, criminal, and FBI. And like I said, except for that gray area of volunteers and student observers. And that means everyone, including your bus drivers, anyone that may work in your kitchen, anyone that you would consider to be a staff member at your facility, they need all three parts of the background check. And again, that includes the maltreatment, the criminal, and the FBI. So let's talk about a few disqualifying offenses. And you will see there's a full list in your licensing requirement book. It's in section 110. No person shall be eligible for a child care facility owner, operator, or employee if they have pled guilty to some of these items here. And you'll see that there's a stipulation on the date of conviction. If it's a misdemeanor, it's 5 years. If it's a felony offense, it's 10 years. And like I said, you could see a full list, but let's say you have an applicant and they have an assault in the first degree and it is a misdemeanor. Basically what that means is if it's been 5 years since that misdemeanor, they would be eligible for employment. If it was a felony, it would have to be 10 years from the date of that conviction. So the terminology can be a little bit confusing when you're reading here. If you ever have questions, please reach out to our unit reach out to your licensing specialist. We'd be happy to clarify exactly what this means. There's some things on this list that you may not think would be a disqualifying offense. You know, there's theft charges. There are other things that theft of public benefits that you may not think as a misdemeanor would be disqualifying, but they are. And so I would really encourage you to just really become very, very comfortable with all of those disqualifying offenses in section 110 of your minimum licensing handbook, so that you'll know if you have an applicant that comes in and they tell you that they have one of these charges, then you'll be aware when you submit that background check that there's a chance that it may be a disqualifying offense. So let's go on to the next slide. And here's a couple of more things that you'll see on that list: forgery, resisting arrest, theft of property. So there's several things on that list. And I would just really get comfortable with it so that you know what you're looking for if you have an applicant that tells you that they have something on their background. Okay, now let's talk about some permanently prohibited offenses. Now, these offenses would not allow an applicant to work in childcare, no matter if it is a misdemeanor or a felony. There is no waiver for these. And this would be if the applicant has been found guilty or has pled guilty. And you can see here, there's several on this list: abuse of an endangered or impaired person, if a felony. There's arson, capital murder, kidnapping, sexual assault in the first degree. So there are several on this list as well. And you can also see this part of the list in your licensing requirement book, section 110. So just some of those examples there, we wanted to make sure that we put that out there so that you kind of also have an idea of what we are looking for when we're adjudicating those background checks for you. Does anyone have any questions about disqualifying offenses or where you can find the list of disqualifying offenses? All right, let's move on. So let's talk about the electronic background check system, also known as NICAR. This is the National Information Consortium of Arkansas. That is what those initials NICAR stand for. All licensed programs in Arkansas must use the online NICAR system. We do not accept fingerprint cards anymore, so everything is done electronically. The background check through NICAR includes the Arkansas State Criminal Background Check, the Federal Criminal Background Check, which is your fingerprints, and as well the National Sex Offender Registry. So when you submit in the NICAR system and you get fingerprinted, you are doing all of that in one electronic process. Providers must register online for the subscription. The annual cost is currently $150 yearly for the subscription. And as most of you do know, there is an email where you can send your receipt for your first year to be reimbursed. And I will make sure that Brenda puts that email in the chat box as well. If it's your first year subscribing and you're a child care provider, Division of Child Care will reimburse you for that $150 fee. So make sure that you send in those receipts for that first year, because we want to help and make sure that we get all of our providers signed up for this system. And just a reminder that this does not include your Arkansas Child Maltreatment Registry request. So once you've done your NICAR submission of your federal and state, you still must go to the central registry and you must do your Arkansas Child Maltreatment request. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation so you can see what the steps look like. Okay, now we're going to look at step by step what the process looks like for submitting a background check. So once you've subscribed to your NICAR account and you're ready to submit your first applicant, you will need to complete the consent form. This document can be found on the background check unit website as well as linked here. And if you have put your email in the chat box, you will be able to click directly on the link from this PDF so that you can save that. Be sure to select childcare for the reason. You see at the top, it says childcare facility provider. You want to make sure that if you are a childcare provider, that is what you're selecting. And then another tip here is just make sure that when you're submitting these, that the provider number is your facility license number, not your facility phone number.
Yeah, hold me for a minute.
Okay, does anyone have any questions about the consent form or? Okay. So once you've submitted this form, you will get a copy emailed to your email address or the email address that you have provided. And it's going to be a PDF and it has 3 pages. So you can see the screenshots here on the slide. Page 1 is going to be the applicant's information that you've typed in. And then you're going to have page 2, that is the notary section. And then page 3 is going to be just a signature, and that is your challenge information there and your Privacy Act statement. So that's the 3 pages that make up the consent form. And so let's talk about page 1. This information is your applicant information. So your facility information, your facility number, which is your license number. And then it's going to be your applicant's name, address, social, and all of that information. This is a great time to go ahead and see that this applicant may need out of state information. So if the applicant has lived out of state in the last 5 years, now is when you would want to go ahead and submit for those out of state. Some states do take a long period of time to come back. So it would be just a good idea to go ahead and get this started. And then on your second page, the applicant is going to sign and date, and the notary must complete their portion. So it's really crucial to look over these forms and make sure that the information is correct and that the notary information matches. So if the notary signature does not match, if the date does not match the applicant date, the submission will be not approved. If the stamp is not legible, it will be not approved. If there is no stamp at all, it will be not approved. This section is very, very crucial, and it's very important that it is all correct. So just like you as providers get audited, we get audited as well from the federal government. And so we have to make sure that we have all of our documents and that we're staying in compliance. So if you have an applicant that you submit and you get an immediate not approved within 24 hours, chances are it's because there's something on the consent form that's incorrect. If there's any pages missing, it will also be not approved. So just make sure that you're taking your time with these consent forms. And if you have a question or you make a mistake and you've already uploaded it, please reach out to us. We'll make sure all of our contact information is in the chat box. You can correct that and send it to us. We can get it uploaded for you so that you're not getting charged a second time to submit that applicant. So just take your time with this consent form and make sure that you are putting all the correct information in and that the notary information is all completed before submitting. Does anyone have any questions about the consent form or what is needed on the consent form?
This is you. Did you get that?
I see Bright Ideas. Bright Ideas, are you able to hear now? Let's see. Okay, Brenda's answering some questions in the chat box, so we're going to keep on going. Okay. If you're having trouble hearing, try to exit and rejoin and see if that works for you. Okay, so now that your consent form is completed, the next step is you are going to submit your applicant. And so now is when you're going to log into your NICAR account. There's a screenshot here so that you can see what the website looks like. It says Arkansas Department of Public Safety at the top and online criminal background check system. Once you're logged into your account, you are going to click on the search tab. This is where you will fill out the applicant's information. And I would recommend to have a copy of the applicant's driver's license while you complete this section. And the reason why is because it's going to ask you for their height, their eye color, their hair color, as well as they're going to need their address and their race and their date of birth. And so I always just recommend to have their driver's license on hand or a copy of it, as well as having this information makes it a little easier because when the applicant goes to be printed at the county office, they're going to use their driver's license to verify identity. So if your legal name is Barbara, but you go by Barb and you don't put your legal information into the system, the fingerprint office is going to more than likely turn you away if it does not match what is on the driver's license. So we just recommend to make sure that you are putting that information exactly as it is on the applicant's driver's license. Okay, and once you submit this information, you'll see here that you're going to get a confirmation page. Well, actually, let me go back. So when you're submitting this information, you will see the area for your signed consent document. That's where you're going to upload your consent forms. And when you click browse, you can select from your computer the PDF where you have your consent form. You're going to just select it, and that's where you'll upload. And your purpose should say CHI for childcare. It should be the only option that you have in your account. And then your search options say search FBI and state. And that also should be the only option because you must run both your FBI and your state when you are completing the applicant. Okay, and now that you've got all this information completed, you're going to submit and you are going to get this review your work and confirm page. So this step is really important. Take a few seconds to review the information that you've submitted. If you see something that you made an error on, you can go back to step one. If you do not review this and you continue to submit and it has errors and then you get not approved because the date of birth is wrong or the name is wrong, you won't be reimbursed by Arkansas State Police for duplicate entries. So please verify that the information is correct. Just take a few seconds to look over it and just make sure there's no errors. Sometimes when you're putting in the date of birth, it can automatically populate the day, you know, maybe that you put in for another applicant. I've had that happen on my own computer. So just take a second and make sure that all of your information is complete on this page. Once you've done that, go ahead and submit. And you're going to get this transaction number here. And that's your confirmation page and your transaction number. Your transaction number should always start with CHI. And then it's going to have a 0 and a 0 and then 7 digits. And that is also your search ID number. So anytime that you need to search for an applicant or when you get ready to schedule your fingerprints in our next step, you're going to need this information. I would recommend to go ahead and just print that confirmation so that you have the CHI number or write it down or if you have an Excel spreadsheets, you know, wherever you may document that information, go ahead and keep that there. Okay, so now we are going to talk about scheduling your fingerprints. Before you schedule the potential employee's fingerprints, go ahead and go into your NICAR account and just make sure that everything has been submitted. Make sure that they're showing up in your account under your history tab. And you're going to go here to the fingerprint scheduling website, and we've got the link there for you. And it is a clickable link in our PDF, so you guys will have that as well as it's on our website. So you're going to go to this website. Sometimes you may get an email, and sometimes you may not, that's asking you to schedule your fingerprint appointments. The NICAR system does sometimes send out that email, but if you have multiple that you've submitted, you may not get them all. So I just recommend bookmarking this website so that you can go ahead and schedule them. You don't have to wait on that email to schedule. As soon as you have submitted your applicant, you can go ahead and get that scheduled for the applicant. Okay, so here we are. If you're ready to schedule your appointment, you're just going to click Make Appointment. And then it's going to take you on to the next page where you're going to fill out the applicant's information. You're going to put in the first and last name, and then you will enter your statute, which is the CHI. And then you're going to enter your transaction number. And remember, we said that this is going to be a 0 and a 0, and then the 7-digit number that you got your confirmation on. And you'll see that next box here. This is just kind of a little tip. It says if you have received a notice that your first set of fingerprints were rejected by the FBI, you should have received an E-number along with the transaction number. So if you ever have an applicant that was rejected, you will get a notice of that, and you'll get a letter from the Arkansas State Police with a long E number. It has an E in front of it. If you were rescheduling prints that were rejected the first time, that's where you would enter that E number. If this is the first time that this person has been fingerprinted, you can disregard that. You don't need to enter anything there. But that's just a little tip in case you're wondering if you have a reject or if you go in the future. That's just a little tip there. Okay, and then whenever you click Submit and Continue, you're going to get a summary page. And then it's going to ask you to go on to the appointment type. This is where you're going to put in the location. You can put in your city if your applicant lives, you know, maybe away from where you are. I know I commute, and so if you have a person that commutes and there's a DHS county location that's closer to them that works better, you can type in their city, and it's going to give you a list of DHS county offices that do fingerprinting here, and you can select the nearest one. And the next thing you're going to do is select your time after you have found your location. Then there is a section that's going to ask you about personal information. This is where you're going to enter the applicant's information, and they will have a confirmation email sent to them with their transaction number that they can print, and they will need to take that to their fingerprint appointment. Make sure that the applicant has a state issued ID or passport to be fingerprinted. And then just a reminder, we talked about making sure that they have their state issue ID. And this is the reason why it's so important to have that correct information. We don't want them to be turned away at this point because a date of birth or a name is incorrect on that driver's license or state issued ID. And then let's go on to the next step here. Okay, so now that you have set up your applicant to be fingerprinted and they've got their appointment, they're ready to go. Now we're going to move on to the Arkansas Child Maltreatment Registry check. So this is the last step for our part of the background check. The Arkansas Child Maltreatment Registry check goes through the central registry, and the applicant must have 5 years of residency listed. And you can see those screenshots here that show what this looks like. And I just want to point out that it says, please select the most applicable answer. You are needing a registry check because. Make sure that when you are selecting these options that you are selecting option 2 that says you are a potential or current employee of a child care facility or residential facility licensed by Arkansas Department of Human Services. So sometimes we see that providers or applicants select the first option that says you are a teacher. And this isn't necessarily the incorrect option because you are a teacher. However, this actually goes to the Arkansas Department of Education. So this is for those teachers that are in the public school system. And if you are a child care facility and you're licensed under Arkansas Department of Human Services, you need to select that second option. And you may have some staff that do work in a public school setting. So you may have a pre-K classroom on site, and they may need to do a child maltreatment through both the Department of Education as well as the Department of Human Services. So you may be doing both of these options, but for our background checks, please make sure that you select option 2. You're going to complete the information here, being sure that you list the 5 years of residency. And then it's going to also ask you if the applicant has lived out of state in the last 5 years. And this is where you can check yes. Okay, and we've got the contact information as well there for the central registry. That way, if you have any questions, you need to reach out to them or you need to check on the status, you can do that. And if you know that your applicant has lived out of state in the last 5 years, this is when you will need to make sure that you initiate those required checks. And we kind of just touched on this a little bit, but some agencies will require submissions of 2 background checks and 2 maltreatment checks. And those agencies are school districts. So school districts must submit background checks and child maltreatment checks to both the Department of Education and the Department of Human Services. And you will probably see in your account that you have an option for EDU and CHI. And so that's something that is a little different for you guys that are on a school district campus. And if you ever have any questions about that or you need some clarification on what you need to do for us, please give us a call. We'll be happy to take a look at it. And then we also have several programs that are part of the Division of Developmental Disabilities Community Program Providers, otherwise known as DDS. So DDS providers that are also child care facilities must submit background checks under both CHI and DDS prefixes. And so those are the other special conditions that agencies may have where you might have more than just the CHI prefix when you're submitting those background checks. If you, again, have any questions, please give us a call. We'll go through with you. We'll figure it out together and make sure that you have the correct prefixes if you think that there is an issue with your NICAR account. Okay, before we talk about out of state, I just wanted to see if anyone had any other questions. It looks like Brenda is answering some emails here. I saw, will you be including information like emails, locations within the information? I'm seeing some good info. Yes, Melinda, we will make sure that when we send the email that we give you that INA receipts email. I'll make sure and put all of my team's contact information as well. How would you account for the 5 years? So Cindy, whenever you're filling out that Arkansas child maltreatment form, it's going to ask you for 5 years of residency. And so your staff member will just need to give you those 5 years of addresses that they've lived at. If they, have only lived in Arkansas, they'll just list their last 5 years of Arkansas addresses. If they've only lived in, one place, then they'll just list that one place. You're basically, when that applicant is signing and notarizing that form, they're stating that this information is true. And so that's where you would account for that information. And that's when you would want to go ahead and request your out-of-state information. And we're going to talk about out-of-state now, because I know that is a big part of this process and can be confusing. So we're just going to take some time to go over that and allow for some questions. Okay. So out-of-state requirements. Any applicant that have lived out of the state of Arkansas in the last 5 years are required to conduct a criminal background check, child maltreatment, and sex offender registry from that state. So there are some stipulations with that, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about. So for example, if you have an applicant in the last 5 years who has lived in Texas last year, and then the year before that, they lived in Montana, you would need to get results from both Texas and Montana. So any state they lived with in the last 5 years. And then each one of the states are a little different. So you'll see here, we do have information for each state. We have a contact list. We also have a portion of our website that we are still in the process where we're always making updates, but we are constantly trying to make sure that we have the most recent information. Every state changes quite frequently. So we do have this interstate child care background. It's the contact list for every state in the US, and it has some links and some great information. So let me go to the next slide so you can see what we got here. So on this contact list, you're going to see that some states say NFF, they're highlighted in red. This means that they are part of the National Fingerprint File. And these states do not require a criminal background check. They are part of, when we do the federal check, they are part of that. So there are some states that you will only need to do the child maltreatment and sex offender registry in. And those states are the ones that are listed in red. So again, this can change frequently. So, sometimes there's changes in states, there's laws that change, it could change from day to day. So the best thing to do would be to reach out to that state, see exactly what is needed from them. You can reach out to us. We will do our best to assist and make sure that we know that you're getting the correct information from that state. And this list is a great way to get contact information. It was just updated in August. And then, of course, like I said, we do have our website as well. And you'll see there's a link on the next slide that you can go to that we are trying to constantly update with contact information and instructions on how to complete the out-of-state information. And so here's the link for our website for instructions, contact information for each one of those states. And then we do have some special conditions. So just wanted to go over a few of those states that are also they have different conditions that are set up, different laws. And so this might be something that you just want to take note of. Tennessee, our regulatory unit here, we will complete those. So if you have a staff member that is coming from Tennessee and that's the only other state they lived in, you do not need to submit a Tennessee request for anything. Our staff will do that here. We have access to do that. And then the same goes for Oklahoma. We have access for that and our staff will complete those on your behalf as well. So California is a closed record state. There are no records required for California. They will not release any records. Arizona will only release the child abuse and neglect results. They do not release the criminal records. They're closed on that part for their state. So unless there are any changes in laws, which again can happen at any time, that's currently the process for California and Arizona. And we will do our best to make sure that we are keeping our website up to date with all of that information. And as well, you can always contact us and we will do our best to make sure that we're giving you the most recent for each state. And so what about applicants that lived in a different country? And I think that I saw this question in the chat box. So for applicants that have lived in a different country, no results are needed for those applicants. They still need to list those addresses on their child maltreatment request, but you do not need to request any background checks from that country.
That's crazy.
Does anyone have any questions about that or about any of the states that we talked about?
Yes, can you repeat what you just said at the end, Kayla?
Yeah, so any applicants who have lived out of country, is that what you were referring to?
Yes.
Okay, so any applicants that have lived in a different country in the last 5 years do not need to do background requests for that country. They'll need to be listed on the Arkansas Child Maltreatment. So if you had an applicant that lived, I think the question was about Mexico. If they lived in Mexico, they need to list that address, but we do not require you to gather any background check information from Mexico. Okay, so now that you know what you need to get from other states and you know what states require criminal and maltreatment, then where do you send those results? So we have a couple of options and each state is different. If the state requires that the information be sent directly to a state agency, some states, sometimes they say we can't release these results to you. It has to go directly to the state of Arkansas. You can use the information here that's on the screen. That's our mailing address there. If they say it needs to come straight to a state email, you can use the email there on screen as well, backgroundcheck@dhs.arkansas.gov. If you have requested the results and it comes to you or it goes to the applicant, you can forward those results onto the email address on the screen. So backgroundcheck@dhs.arkansas.gov. That email is for all things out of state. So if you have questions about the out-of-state process, or you have results, or you're not sure if the results are what you're needing, you can send it to that email. We have that dedicated so that we can make sure that we're getting this process as quickly as possible. And then here, we also just have the same link again for our website. And this is where we have our out-of-state information. If you see errors on the website, please let us know. Like I said, we constantly want to keep that updated for you all because we know that it's hard to keep up with what states, need this and what states need that. And, who do I email? How do I do it? What's the website? So we want to make sure that we keep that updated for you. And so there's the link again for that. Any questions about where to send the background check from out-of-state results? Okay, so let's talk about a few things that we just can't stress enough. So the number one thing is making sure their information is correct before submitting. We also just want to make a couple of final reminders here. A staff member may not begin work until the state criminal record check result has been returned as satisfactory. And so this means that you will see a NICAR status of provisional. And that's when you can hire that staff member. They can be working, but they must be supervised at all times by a staff member who has completed their background checks. So if you want to hire that person to be a float staff in your facility, as long as they're supervised at all times, then you can hire them in that provisional status. Now, if you have questions, about a certain applicant, or you just, you've got kind of a different situation, reach out to your licensing specialist. They are happy to assist. If they're, not sure, they'll reach out to us as well. We want to help. So reach out if you have questions about an applicant, but that's what that provisional status means. And you can log into your NICAR account to see the status. And you just go to your history tab and you can search. There's several different ways that you can search, but that's where you'll see the status of your applicant. So as always, please contact us if you have questions. Here are some other important phone numbers. NICAR, there's a subscription number. If you're having issues with your subscription or payment information, that is where you can contact NICAR directly. They'll be able to help you with your invoicing, payment information. And then there's also a NICAR help desk. So this would also be if you are having some issues getting logged in, if you need your password reset, if whoever was doing your background checks previously is no longer there and you need to get the account merged over with your new HR or whoever is taking over doing that, that's also where you would call. So those phone numbers are there for those reasons. If you are just wanting to check on the status or you're not sure about something that you see in the system, please call us directly. Our background check unit number is there at the top. That'll come to our unit, to one of our staff. And again, we will make sure our contact information is in the chat box as well. And then we have the central registry phone number at the bottom, and that's for your Arkansas child maltreatment questions. And then the next slide that we are going to talk about are possible delays in the process. So the very first one are pending delays. So if you have submitted an applicant and you see that they are still in a pending status, a possible delay is that the state criminal report requires additional information. And when you submit an applicant, it immediately goes through Arkansas State Police for the state criminal check. If you receive a notification that DHS is going to do more research or see that they're in pending, that just means that Arkansas State Police is doing manual research. That rarely happens, but sometimes it can be due to an applicant possibly living out of state recently. They may just need to do some more digging to see, what they can find, or if they haven't found a match. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything is bad. It's just that they're doing more research. So typically those will be processed within 24 to 72 hours. If you ever see a delay on your account and you are like, oh, this doesn't seem right, this person should be already in provisional, reach out to us. We are more than happy to take a look at it and let you know what the delay is. So let's talk about some other provisional delays. So if you have submitted your applicant and they are in provisional and it has been several days and there is no change in that status. So it could be because the fingerprints have not been completed yet. If it still says that the fingerprints are pending, that means that the applicant has not been fingerprinted. It could be because fingerprints were rejected the first time and they are needing to be printed again. It could mean that the federal report requires additional information from the applicant, in which we would send them a letter notifying them that we require additional information. It could also be that the child maltreatment has not been completed. So when we process these background checks, we check to see that your Arkansas child maltreatment has been submitted. And if that has not been submitted, that could also cause that provisional delay. And then the last thing and the most common are the out-of-state checks have not been completed. So your applicant will remain in that provisional status until the out-of-state results come in. Now, oh, sorry about that. So the last little section here to talk about is the not approved delays. So if you get a, not approved status and you get that pretty quickly within the first 24, 48 hours, it's more than likely going to be the first couple of things. So an incomplete consent form, the wrong form uploaded, the notary stamp is not legible, or it's missing signatures or dates. The notary date does not match the applicant's date. And those are all part of the consent form, and that is the most common when you are immediately getting the not approved status. Now, a couple of other reasons why it could be not approved is that the wrong name or date of birth was submitted in the NICAR system. If Arkansas State Police says they leave a note that says that the applicant's date of birth is incorrect, then it will be not approved. You will have to resubmit. So that's why we really just say make sure that the information being put in is correct. And then the applicant was submitted more than once. So if it's a duplicate entry and you've submitted that applicant more than one time, the duplicate entry will be not approved. And then the fingerprint or the Arkansas child maltreatment has not been completed within 45 days of the NICAR submission. So if you submitted the applicant and they did not go and get fingerprinted and it's been over 45 days, you're going to see that not approved status. They're not going to be able to stay in provisional for that long period of time unless they're waiting on out-of-state results. We do allow over 45 days for out of state because we know specifically, if any of you have done Texas recently, you know that they are around 50 days behind on processing those right now. So, we're not going to not approve them for out of state results, but if they do not have their maltreatment done and their fingerprints within 45 days, you'll get a not approved status. Does anyone have any questions about any of the delays or what can be causing those delays? I see how often do background checks need to be done for current staff? So yes, every 5 years, Mary Beth, the background checks, the criminal and federal have to be done every 5 years. And then your Arkansas child maltreatment is done every 2 years. Okay. So do we have any other questions? I'm going to go through the chat box, but does anyone have any other questions that they have not seen in the chat box or that they have? Let's see, I'm going to scroll up to the top. I think we've answered a lot of these questions. Melinda, is it possible to use the background checks, maltreatment checks made for the daycare for other organizations as well? So that's a great question, Melinda, and no. So the background checks that you are submitting are being released directly to the Department of Human Services and DCCECE. So they aren't able to be used for other organizations. Now, the reason being because we may clear a background check based on a criminal record, but another organization may have a different set of laws on what is a disqualifying offense. So for example, if they are, like you said, volunteering, they may not allow you to have any type of record to volunteer, whereas we may allow someone to work, even though they have a speeding ticket. So that type of thing, it can be different based on the organization. So those background checks are specific to DHS and the division, and that's why they are not able to be moved. And the same goes for from provider to provider. The state of Arkansas, the laws do not allow for them to be moved from facility to facility. So if you run a background check on an applicant, they are not accepted to be taken to another facility. It's specific to your facility and your license number. Trying to make sure that we did not miss any questions. Brenda, the $150 fee, does this apply to school districts? The $150 fee is the charge that NICAR, they do charge to have the account set up. Now, you do pay that fee every year, and you do get reimbursed for the first year. If you are a licensed child care program, you can send that receipt into INA receipts and get reimbursed for that first year. It's just for the first year. As of right now, I have not heard any change in that. So you will have to pay it after that first year. And Melinda said that she had an applicant that was fingerprinted multiple times. So if you have an applicant that is rejected, so once they're rejected the first time, they do have to be printed a second time under the same exact transaction number and e-number. So whatever their transaction number is, they'll go down, they'll get printed a second time. They'll have that long e-number that gets put in. If that one gets rejected too, which a lot of times it does, some people, their fingerprints just don't print well. They may not have enough digits. They may not have enough fingers to be printed. So if it gets rejected a second time, Arkansas State Police will initiate a name search, and they will send us hard copy results. So if you have an applicant that gets rescanned their second time, and then you do not receive any change, and it's been, over 5 days, reach out to us. We will help. The FBI reject process is a little bit longer because they do have to send us results by mail. So the process in general just takes a little bit longer, but we will reach out and make sure that they have been submitted and that we get a copy of those results and we update them electronically. But if you have questions or you have someone that's been rejected multiple times, please give us a call and we will make sure that we get some assistance, and we'll work with our colleagues over at Arkansas State Police to be sure that everything's been submitted correctly. Alice said, it's my first year, but what if you don't have your receipt? Hey, Alice, you can reach out to NICAR. Let's see, I'll put it back on the screen as well, and we'll make sure and send everyone this. You can reach out to the NICAR subscription phone number there and ask them for a copy of your receipt or your invoice. You could also submit, if you paid with a credit card, you can submit that statement where you paid the INA subscription that first year, and then you can submit that. Allison, did you say fingerprinting needs to be done twice if our district requires it and for childcare? So Allison, yes. And I think, let's see. And like what Brenda said, school districts have an ADE account and they also have a CHI account. So if you have a teacher that works in a preschool room, they will need to be submitted for child care licensing, and they will also have to be required for the Department of Ed. So they will get fingerprinted twice, they will get submitted twice into your two different accounts, one under CHI, and I believe the other one will be under DE or EDU. And whoever submits your background checks, they should have both of those on their login. If you guys have direct questions about that, or if you need help with that process, let us know. And the reason being for that is our systems are different. The Department of Ed, they have a different process that they use. They have different regulations. So being approved to be a teacher to work in a school system through the Department of Education, their requirements and their regulations are different than what the state is under DHS. So your minimum licensing regs have different disqualifying offenses, and that's why those have to be done twice. And I know that can be a little complicated. So if you guys have questions, please feel free to give us a call and we will help walk you through it. Let's see. I think we got all the questions. Did anyone have any other questions? You can put them in the chat box, or I think you can unmute yourself. Yes, Melinda, and the same rules do apply to home licensed childcare centers. So any childcare facility, whether you are home-based or you're center-based, if you are licensed through the Department of Human Services, all of these same regulations do apply.
Okay, I had a question. I had joined last year and paid the $150, but didn't know I could get reimbursed. Can I still get reimbursed?
So Lois, if you will send an email with your invoice to the INA receipts, and you can attach it, and then just go ahead and let them know that this is actually the second year that you have it, but that you have you did not get reimbursed for the one time, and they will respond and let you know from that email address whether or not they can process it. I believe it's just the one time 150. So you should not have a problem with that, but send it to that email. That's going to go directly to someone in the finance department, and they'll be able to direct you for sure on that. Okay.
Is the email in the chat box?
Yes, it is. Let me make sure, and we'll make sure and put it in there again for you.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Let's see. Brenda's got it. There it is, the INA receipts email. Okay, any other questions of anything that we did not talk about? Is there anything that you would like to know or need clarification on? We've got our whole team here, so sure we can answer any questions that you might have. Brenda, do you have anything to add that we did not talk about today?
The only thing that I wanted to discuss was something about the history reports. If you have an applicant that does have a history on their background check, that we go from the disposition date. It's not the date of the arrest. And that would be the only thing that I wanted to add.
Yeah, so and what Brenda's referring to is if you have an applicant and they tell you that they had this charge and it was in 2020, but they didn't go to court until 2021. We go by the disposition date, which is their court date of when the actual disposition, if they were found guilty, not guilty, dismissed, whatever it may be. So even though maybe the offense happened in 2020, their 5 or 10 year date doesn't start until 2021 when they actually went to court. And that's just what she is talking about with regards to the criminal history report. And again, if you have any questions about that, feel free to give us a call. We'll go over it with you, and we'll give you any information that we have. We always recommend to submit the applicants. We'll take a look at it, and we'll make sure that everything's good to go. So if there's not any other questions, that is the end of our training for today. So we do this every month. We do it the last Thursday of the month. We would love to have you all back. If you have any suggestions on anything that you would like us to talk about in the next training, feel free to let us know. I'll make sure that I put my information in the chat box right now. That way you'll have it as well. We're just really, really thankful to have all of you joining us today. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to call us anytime. We're here to help. We want to help. We know that you are all doing your best for the children in the state of Arkansas. And so we want to help in any way that we can to make it a little bit smoother. And we also know that you are trying to get applicants in the door like yesterday. So we know that when you submit those, you need them quick. Feel free to email us, call us anytime, especially if you feel like you need something pushed through. If you think that there's something that's been in provisional for too long, reach out to us. We're here to help. We want to get those processed as quickly as possible. We will make sure and send this out to anyone that has put their email in the chat box. If you have not, you can go ahead and do that. We'll make sure and get this out to you. If you have any other questions, give us a call, email us. We'll be happy to hear from you. I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you again for joining with us. And we will talk with you all next month.